Hi everyone, it's Carrie. Welcome back to Gender Mix. Hopefully you don't really hear all this construction noise that just started up in the background that I can hear, because it's really distracting to me, and I don't want it to be distracting to you. So I'm going to try really hard to ignore it and talk to you about mental health, and mental health for non-binary, genderqueer, transgender people. How that interacts, like how your mental health interacts with identity, I guess, and how sometimes it has nothing to do with your identity, but other people want it to have everything to do with your identity, right? So hopefully I can explain that a little better. I did have to disclose, I'm very, very fortunate that I don't really have any mental health issues or diagnoses or anything that affect me personally. I have some friends very close to me who do deal with things, especially like anxiety and depression is very common. And I have some really extreme mental health issues in my family history that I've dealt with loved ones dealing with those issues. But I think we're very, very slowly as a society coming to recognize mental health issues as just as valid as physical health issues. And I think this is important to talk about because, for one, I do, on YouTube and just on the internet in general, see and hear a lot of transgender or non-binary people talking about things like mental health and being trans. And we have to recognize there's some overlap there. And of course there is. Of course, if every single person you interact with doesn't interact with you in a way that validates who you are and is congruent with who you see yourself as, that causes some stressors. I don't have any kind of social anxiety or general anxiety. I know people who do, so I feel very lucky that I don't. But there are days that I can start to feel some social anxiety around my gender identity. I think I made a video kind of recently about just being constantly misgendered, and that does start to cause some general mental stress and it's annoying. And so of course, if you are dealing with whatever your mental health state is, and then you have all of these outside forces that are also not correct, and it can be the misgendering. It might be if you're in a situation where you're waiting to be able to begin a physical transition, maybe you're not 18 yet and you're waiting to be able to start hormones, or who knows, anything, waiting on surgeries. Maybe you're still just trying to figure out your identity. That just adds all of that stress to the situation. And other people telling you that you're maybe whether your gender is valid or not, just it's bad time. I'm also going to talk a little bit specifically about children and adolescents, because some of my other videos I've talked about my expertise is in the field of school counseling, and even for someone in that field, I've read a lot of information about children and students who are transgender or even just gender non-conforming, maybe not any type of trans or non-binary identity, but there are things about them that are not congruent with how we gender students. This is a side note. Education, like everything else, is very binary in certain ways, and they talk very much about how this is how boys are expected to act and this is how girls are expected to act. Students don't fit in those neat boxes, but if you're extremely outside of your norm, regardless of your identity, that's a whole nother level of stress. So I've read a lot about this because it's something that if I ever really do pursue PhD type research, I think it would be in this area. But one of the really interesting and common sense things to me that I've read is that children who have gender identity, well, at one point it used to be diagnosed as a disorder, but whose gender identity is not congruent with what people see it as. So if you have a kid who is just convinced they're a boy or a girl because they are, but everyone in their life sees them differently, it adds all of this anxiety. They develop a lot of depression. They rate themselves extremely high, or percentage-wise, much more frequently on suicide rating scales. Just very extreme reactions. Whereas that same population of students, when they get support, when they have families that are validating of their identity, not only do those instances of anxiety and depression and suicide ideation, not only do they lower, they actually lower below the general population. So what that tells us is when you take a person and you validate and celebrate who they are, they're a generally happier, more well-adjusted person. And I don't want that to sound like I'm saying that all you have to do to help someone not be depressed is validate them, because clearly there's a lot more to like depression than just that. But that's like really important. And also, why wouldn't you want to do that for people in your life, like family and friends? Like, why wouldn't you want to validate who they are? That's just like the nice, right thing to do. But I find it really important and interesting that those rates drop so significantly, to the point that it's like now they're more well-adjusted in some senses than the general population of students. And I think that says a lot about who we are as people, more than anything. And the other flip side of this is especially for I'm going to say adult transgender people, for the most part, are non-binary people, but people who have gotten significantly far along where they feel like they've completed their transition, or they're far enough along that like passing is not an issue for them. Dysphoria is minimized to a very controllable, like they can deal with their dysphoria pretty like, it's pretty okay most of the time due to like hormone surgeries, whatever transition process they've gone down. Those people still can experience mental health issues like depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, I mean like anything. But those people sometimes run into the opposite problem, where professionals, even therapists, whoever, want to kind of come at everything from the perspective of everything is because you're trans, or everything is because you're non-binary and you're not just fitting into this like binary box of what we expect from you, and that's why you have this anxiety, and that's why you feel this way or react this way, and it's all related to being trans. And you can talk to these folks and they will tell you like that's actually not related whatsoever, and they might tell you that at one point yes it was, or maybe never. Like maybe they grew up with a great family and their transition was actually like as smooth as it can possibly be, and they're super well adjusted and happy with themselves as far as their like transition gender identity goes, but they still have these other mental health issues because, like I had mentioned before, there are lots of other things. There are like changes in the brain, like you've probably seen pictures of brain scans of people with different like diagnoses of things. I always think of the ADHD ones, and I have mentioned before like my ADHD, which my personal view on that is that is not a mental health issue. It's okay if you have a different view. To me, that's actually a really big asset to who I am, but that's a 20-minute video I could make easily. So I just kind of wanted to talk about this and acknowledge it and make people aware of it, and I really kind of wanted to share information about like, yes, people are generally, their mental health is better when you treat them like you should, but also that you can still struggle with mental health and be trans or non-binary, but that is not the reason that you're struggling with mental health, because it's not necessarily a cause of those mental health issues, right? Like, I think that makes sense. I hope it makes sense. And I hope you didn't hear too much of this construction, because it's really distracting, as you could probably tell by the nature of this video. So anyways, have a fantastic week. I will talk to you again next Saturday. Do all the like, subscribing, follow the social media in the description, leave comments, all that good stuff. Bye.